Hey, it's great to see all of you. My name's Hunter. I'm one of the pastors here, along with Dave, who you just met. Dave has done a great job working with some of the fellowship group leaders and getting ready to start these new groups. So I encourage you to check those out. We'll actually have a few more groups that will be added to the roster next week as we get a few details worked out. So if you want to wait for that, that's fine. Those groups we'll do sign-ups all through August, and then those groups will start meeting 1st of September, right around Labor Day or shortly thereafter. So would encourage you to get into a group. Another thing to take note of coming up, I just wanted to go ahead and make you aware of something coming up here in a few weeks. 3 weeks, I believe it is, from today, August 29th, the last Sunday. We have a little standing tradition that we've done for the past couple of years as a church where we take the last Sunday in August before everyone scatters for Labor Day. We take the last Sunday in August and we just do an update for you on where this church stands and where we're going and what we're going to be working on for the next year. We call it State of the Church, and so that's coming up here in 3 weeks. And here's the deal. That's why I want to go ahead and tell you about this. This is the only Sunday of the year that I'm going to twist your arm and guilt trip you to come to church. And here's why. Because we are calling you. We're calling you here to be part of something bigger than the typical Colorado definition of life, which is that we have a lot of fun and work as little as possible. And we're calling you to be part of something bigger than that. We believe that Jesus is doing something in us and through us. We believe God is taking us somewhere. That our church has grown a lot in the last year, and many of you, just by your presence here, are evidence that God is indeed at work in our midst. And so we want to take one Sunday and just pause and ask, what is He doing, and where is He asking us to go, and where is He asking us to be obedient? And so we think it's just really important for you to be here, and we actually think it'll bless your life to be part of this, and it'll be more fun than any life you can create for yourself. So here's what that means. That means if you were planning to take a vacation, you should just postpone it to the next weekend. The next weekend is Labor Day anyway. Those of you that have jobs, you will get that Monday off. And so you'll have a 3-day weekend already. So just postpone it. If you wake up on that Sunday morning and your kids are sick and you don't want to bring them to church, just sprinkle some Cheerios on the floor, lock the door, and they'll be fine. That has made me a lot of money babysitting, that technique. If you are going to the mountains camping, get up at the crack of dawn on Sunday morning and come home. You're not sleeping anyway when you camp. Camping, I've never understood it. It's sleeping on the ground. It's not comfortable. You don't actually get any sleep. So since you're not sleeping, get up at 6 a.m. or whatever and get here for the State of the Church Sunday. I think this will be really important as we set the direction for the next year and review where we have been. Now, if you have a Bible, go ahead and grab it and turn to the book of Proverbs. If you don't have a Bible, there's some on the end of your rows. And Proverbs is going to be right in the middle, right after the very lengthy book of Psalms. It goes Psalms and then Proverbs. We're going to have several verses today. If you're not a Bible flipper, and that's okay if you're not. To be honest, I'm not a great Bible flipper either, and I get paid to stand up and talk about Scripture. I often don't remember where things are in the Bible. I remember that they're there, and I can quote them, but I can't tell you where they are. It's the same way. I'm the same way with geography. A couple of weeks ago, I said that Mount Everest was somewhere in North America. It turns out it's like in Nepal and Tibet. I had it pegged for somewhere in Nebraska. So I don't have a great detailed memory. I don't have manual dexterity to flip around the Bible. So if you don't, we're going to put verses on the screen for you. That was a long way of saying we're going to put verses on the screen for you. But if you're a Bible flipper, turn to Proverbs. And we are continuing a series in the book of Proverbs, a little mini-series we're calling Inside Out. And the basic idea behind this is that life is determined, the direction of your life is determined, the quality of your life is determined not so much by just what happens to you, but by what's going on inside of you. Because Proverbs says what is going on in your heart and what is going on in your spirit is going to come out and is going to affect your entire life. And that leads into the problem that we're going to deal with today. What happens when your insides are all messed up? What happens when you are what we might call downcast or overwhelmed with anxiety or depressed, whatever you want to call it? Your emotional equilibrium is off. And here's the deal, that happens to everyone. So when this happens to you, not if it happens to you, when this happens to you, how do you handle it? What do you do with it? Because how you handle it is going to determine the future direction of your life. When you are going through times of great strain and anxiety and turmoil and sadness, how you handle that could set the direction for the next few years, if not longer, of your life. It's a very crucial time in life. You know that sometimes in life are more influential than others. There are certain moments that have a disproportionate influence on the rest of your life. When you meet someone and fall in love, that first date has more influence than just every other bad date you've ever had in your life. Hard times are the same way. They have disproportionate influence in your life. So how are you going to handle it? Many of you are going through this right now. How are you going to handle it? To see the importance of this, I want you to look at Proverbs chapter 18, verse 14, which reads like this: "A man's spirit will endure sickness, but a crushed spirit who can bear?" Now, this is when Proverbs refers to our spirit, it is usually talking about our emotional life. Sometimes it uses the word heart, which talks about our emotional life, and then also the very core, the very seat of our being, what we value is most important. We'll see this in a minute. But when it talks about our spirit, it's typically talking about our emotional life, how we react to the things that are happening to us. It's based on the Hebrew word for wind. And think about what this is saying. Wind is forceful. It's powerful. It moves things along. And so Proverbs is saying your spirit, your emotional life moves you along. So when you have a crushed spirit, then the wind isn't blowing. This is referring to someone who has lost their zeal for life. They've lost the energy to grab life by the ears and make something out of it. They're so downcast that they're listless. They don't have the emotional equilibrium to get out there and make something of their day, of their life. Now, if you've ever gone through a period, especially of transition or change, you know that emotional energy is very important. Like if you've ever gone through a job search, if you've ever lost a job and then gone through a job search, you know that you have to muster a lot of energy to keep making phone calls and send off your resume and going to interviews and following up with potential employers. There's a level of perseverance that has to take place. I've known very few people whose job search goes like this. I found a job that I really was interested in. I sent them my resume. They called me back that afternoon. I went in the next day for an interview. They called me the next day and told me I had the job. Very few people's job search goes like this. For most people, it's difficult, it's hard, and the energy to keep initiating in the face of disappointment is ultimately what lands you a job. Or if you have ever moved to a new city, this is some of you right now, it takes a lot of energy just to get out there and make new friends and find new routines and get connected to people. It's a period of transition, and it requires a lot of emotional stamina. And if your spirit is crushed, then you will not make that transition well. Are you tracking with me? You need this emotional energy to deal with life. And so notice what this is saying. It says, a man's spirit will endure sickness. And in other words, oftentimes we notice that when we're physically sick, we can overcome that by strong will. We'll notice people that get really sick and we'll say, well, she has a really strong will. She's a fighter. And what we mean is that even though she's weak, she's going to beat this simply by the strength of her will. And so we can overcome sickness, but a crushed spirit who can bear it. In other words, it's actually easier to overcome a physical illness than it is emotional despair. It's more important to maintain your inner equilibrium than anything else. It's more important to maintain your zeal for life than even your health. So how do you do that? But for some of you today, you need wisdom for how to do this. And here's the good news. God in His Word has hope for you. He has hope for you to renew and restore a crushed spirit. And the first thing Proverbs is going to tell us is that you have to be able to understand what is actually going on inside of you. I recently read a study by an author named Daniel Goleman. He's been around for a while. He published a study a few years ago in the Harvard Business Review on what he called emotional intelligence. And he said he found that the best performers in work, but this would apply to all of life, have an ability to regulate themselves emotionally. They have an ability to understand what's going on inside of them. They have an ability to understand how their emotions affect others. When they're going through periods of frustration or anxiety, they can describe why. They can put their finger on what it is, and they can regulate themselves. So even secular folks have discovered what Proverbs is talking about here. You need to understand what's going on inside of you. And here's what Proverbs is going to say. When you start getting into your heart, to your spirit, it's complicated. It's not easy to figure out what's going on inside of you. It's more nuanced than you might imagine. See, Proverbs, a lot of people have an impression of the Bible that goes something like this. The Bible is a book that was written in ancient times by primitive, simple people. And we, modern people, have discovered so much in the thousands of years since Proverbs was written that surely we are more sophisticated than this simple little book of the Bible. Now, here's the thing, actually. You will, if you read the Bible, you will discover that it actually has a more sophisticated, more nuanced, more complex, more multifaceted view of human nature than just about any modern model that you will find. If you go to a book at Barnes & Noble, you will find that it pales in simplicity compared to the nuance, the complexity of Proverbs. Proverbs is more sophisticated than most counseling models I've ever seen. It is more sophisticated than most contemporary advice we ever get. It has a very sophisticated view of human nature. In this sense, it's kind of like a good doctor. If you go to a good doctor with a sickness, he won't just immediately say, "Oh, here's what it is," but he'll test you and he will observe you and he'll try out several things because he knows that one symptom can have many different causes. And so he's not so naive as to say this symptom is always related to this cause. He will work with the complexity of your human body. And here's an experiment. If you ever, next time you're sick, just Google your sickness, and you will discover, Google your symptom, and you will discover it could be any number of things. If you have a headache, just Google what causes a headache, and you will discover you could have a sinus infection, you could be dehydrated. Your head could be full of pounds and pounds and pounds of mucus. You could have a migraine headache. You could have a brain tumor. And the point is, you don't even know what causes a headache without further examination. It's complicated. And so Proverbs is going to say, when we are downcast of spirit, when our spirit is crushed, it's complicated. So here are some things that could contribute to it. It's going to give us several causes throughout this book. And the first one we see in chapter 12, verse 25. Read it with me. Anxiety in a man's heart weighs him down, but a good word makes him glad. Anxiety could be your issue. Now, anxiety is referring to the emotional reaction when your well-being is threatened. This is a circumstantial thing. You're reacting to circumstances or to threats in your life. Anxiety is particularly concerned about the future. So you could have concern about what your immediate future is going to look like. This is anxiety. And this could be part of your issue. Here's another one in 13:12. Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a desire fulfilled is a tree of life. And hope deferred is a way of saying life hasn't worked out like you wanted it to. You had hoped that you would be in a certain place by now, but you're not. See, part of our problem, it usually starts with circumstances. This is what Proverbs is telling us. Whether it's anxiety about the future circumstances or it's disappointment with our present circumstances, whatever it is, it usually is triggered by some circumstantial cause. This is how we get downcast. This is how we get depressed. The typical American has a plan for their life. They have an idea about how life should go. A typical American plan, not all of us buy into this, but a typical one would go like this. By the time I'm in my early 20s, I should be finished with schooling, and then by the time I'm in my late 20s, I should have a really sweet job, and by the time I'm in my early 30s, I should be married, and then if I'm in my late 30s, I should have kids. By the time I'm in my mid-40s, those kids should be getting out of diapers, and I'm no longer having to change those diapers. By the time I'm hitting my 50s, those kids ought to be going away, and I have raised them well, and so they're going to leave my house at age 18 to 22. They're going to leave my house, and they're never going to come back. And they're going to be self-sustaining. They're going to make wonderful decisions because I raised them up well, and because I handle my money well, I'm going to be pretty financially well off. I'm going to hit 60, and then I am going to quit working, and I'm going to live the life that I always wanted to have for the first 60 years, and I couldn't because I was doing all those other things. And that is the preferred plan that many of us have for our life. And here's the thing. If at any point along the way your life does not follow that track, you are prone to Proverbs 13:12. Hope deferred makes the heart sick. And so if you are some ripe old age of 25 and you're still not in a relationship, you can be downcast about this. If you're in your mid-30s and you're still not in a relationship, it's over, you know. There is no, your life is done. If you get married and you had hoped to have kids, but for some reason you can't have kids, this can cause a great deal of anxiety. If those kids grow up and don't go like you wanted them to go, that can cause a great deal of anxiety. If you get to be 60 and you're still not financially independent, or many people find that they get to that stage and they are, and it's just not all they hoped it would be, they're disappointed with their life as it is. So circumstances are the first thing you need to know. You need to be able to know what's causing, what circumstance, what hope, what did I place my hope in that's disappointed me. But here's the deal. Though that might be the trigger, this will then be compounded by other factors, Proverbs will say. Part of your problem could, for example, be physical. Look at 14:30. Proverbs says, a tranquil heart gives life to the flesh, but envy makes the bones rot. Look at 17:22. A joyful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones. Now, this is an early recognition of what we might today call psychosomatic issues. There is a connection between our body and our spirit, our inner and our outer being. And what goes on inside of us can affect even our physical health. And if it works in that direction, then it does stand to reason it could work in the other direction as well. Have any of you ever been sick? Okay. When you're sick, when I get a sinus infection, I lose all hope of life itself. Life can be going great for me, but if I have a sinus infection, I start thinking, my job stinks, my church stinks. I don't want to do anything except lay here on the couch and watch SportsCenter 10 times today. Usually I'm a reader and I'm a learner and I'm always anxious to acquire new understanding and go out and make something of the world. This is just how I'm wired. But when I'm just a little bit sick, then suddenly I don't want to do anything but sit there and stare at the wall and think about how bad my life is. Because there is a connection between physical and emotional well-being. I've told you before, this is why I run. If you ever see me out running, and many of you have, if you ever see me out running and I look angry and I look like I'm mad at the world, it's because I am. I don't like running. The process is very painful. But the act of running triggers a chemical in my brain that makes me happy. And so if you would just follow me home and wait till I get out of the shower, you would find that I am a witty, jovial little man. And the reason is because I have all these happy chemicals running around in my brain that have been triggered by running. And so I run to chase away stress, to chase away anxiety, to chase away the blues. And so when I get home from work at the end of a hard day of work and all I want to do is lay on the couch, I drag myself out to run because I get 3 or 4 more hours that night of just happiness and productivity and creativity and light. In fact, after I run, I rarely even want to go to bed that night. I'll just lay in bed thinking about how much I enjoy my life because there's a connection. So some of your issue could also be compounded by a physical cause. That's what Proverbs is saying. Here's another potential cause. It could be social. It could be relational. Look at 12:25 again. Anxiety in a man's heart weighs him down, but a good word makes him glad. You know what this is saying? When you're anxious, what you often need is a word from outside. You don't need exercise. You don't even need your circumstances to change. You need a friend who can talk to you and who can encourage you and who can help you see the big picture. You need a word from outside. Which means you need someone in your life who can speak that word. And so if you're going through a difficult time and you have no one who can offer a good word to make you glad, then that could compound your problem. Look at 16:24. Gracious words are like a honeycomb, sweetness to the soul and health to the body. There's a lot more going on in that proverb than you realize. Honeycomb is a way of saying honey in its purest form. And in ancient cultures, and in fact, still today, just go get a bag of Ricola cough drops. Honey was considered to have medicinal value. And so it had this double benefit. It tastes good, and it's good for you. It's good for you physically. Now here's what this is saying. Gracious words, someone speaking life to you, is sweetness to your soul and health to your body. Look at 17:17. A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. Proverbs is saying when you're going through a dark night of your soul, what you need is a friend. What you need is a brother. So, it stands to reason then that if you're not in relationships with people who can do that for you, this could compound your problem. Now, Proverbs will say one more thing. It could also be a spiritual issue. Look at chapter 3, verses 5 and following. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make your paths straight. It will be healing to your flesh and refreshment to your bones. Now, when Proverbs tells us to trust in the Lord with all our hearts, it is now talking about the very core of your being. What do you value most? What do you trust most? What is most important to you? What is it that you look to as the one thing that you've got to have or you can't live? And the insight here is that we are very prone to making someone other than God the most important thing or person in our lives. And we often ask them to bear more weight than they can. And when circumstances attack that thing that we have asked to bear that weight and weakens its foundation, it leaves us in despair. So it works like this. If you get married and you think that Jerry Maguire, that person completes you, When you discover that that person is not perfect, when you discover that marriage is not just I come home from work, we kiss, we eat dinner, then we're naked, when you discover it's more complicated than that, then you are prone to being downcast of soul, and the reason you are is you've asked that relationship to bear more weight than it can. If your definition of success is upward and onward in my career, and you get stuck in middle management, and you're actually you might even discover you're not talented enough to run a company. You could despair if that's what you've built your significance on, because you've asked it to bear too much weight. If you've adopted the Colorado definition of life, that life is as much fun as I can squeeze into a weekend, you will have a story that many people have, which is after 2 or 3 years of fishing every stream and skiing every slope, and you've conquered all 86 14ers or however many we have here. You've attained the Subaru. You will discover that there's a whole class of people here that actually get bored with that. They actually, after 3 or 4 years, find that it's not as enjoyable as it once was. I started coming out here to work when I was about it was 11 years ago. I got put on a consulting project here, and so I was here in the summers, and I was learning to fish at the time, and so I would just take off on the weekends and go fishing. I fished every river you can fish in this state, and after about 2 summers of that, I was bored with it. I was kind of over it, and I discovered that you better have another reason to live than just playing in the mountains, or you're going to max that out by the time you're like 26, and unfortunately, you're probably going to live longer than that. And what are you going to do with the rest of your life? It can't bear the weight you've asked it to. And so Proverbs says, sometimes the issue is spiritual. We need to trust in the Lord with all our hearts. Now, listen to what we've learned so far. We've learned that it could be circumstantial, it could be physical, it could be social, it could be spiritual. Now, if you can begin to see the complexity of what's going on inside of us, then you're on the path to being wise. You're beginning to see even that these things can work together sometimes. Like you can have a circumstantial issue, you can go through a breakup, and because you go through that breakup, you're depressed, which is what most people who go through breakups are, and you're not a musician, you're not in any rock musician, so you can't write music, so you just begin to eat a lot, and because you eat a lot, you start to get kind of fat and lazy. So now there's a physical issue that's compounding your depression, and then you begin to withdraw from people because you don't want to be around people because everyone reminds you of your ex and the fact that you're lonely, so you withdraw from people. Now you've got a social issue compounding that, and on top of that, you've put way too much weight on that person you were dating. That was a spiritual problem, and it's all working together to cause you to despair. Or maybe you just get disappointed with your life as it is, and then you need someone to talk to, but you find you don't have a friend. And the reason you don't have a friend is because up to this point, you've been too proud to let someone else into your life. You've got a spiritual issue, compounding a social issue, compounding a circumstantial issue. In other words, it's complicated. Now, if you begin to see all this, though, here's what you will soon discover. This is why Proverbs gives us all these different things that could be going on. Because you will often find that one of these things is the point of leverage you need to get out of the ditch. And realizing how this is working, you often find one of these circumstances or one of these causes is a leverage point. And I'm going to try to explain to you how leverage works. This is going to be a mechanical illustration. I can't guarantee this is going to go well. A few weeks ago, I tried to explain how water comes up from the bottom of from the ground underneath the surface of the earth in a spring, and I didn't know how. It turns out, I got into the illustration, I realized I hadn't thought it through. And it turns out the engineers pulled me aside afterwards. There's pressure that causes water to come up through the ground. There's little people, and their job is to push water up through the ground. So I'm going to attempt to explain to you how leverage works. No guarantees, but work with me. If you are trying to move something really heavy, oftentimes the best way to move it is not to bear hug it and to lift it and to move it. Just a little while ago, I was trying to move a stack of about 15 chairs, and I found as I wrapped my arms around them, even though I've been working out a lot, as I wrapped my arms around them, see there? As I wrapped my arms around them, and I squeezed, I found that I could not lift these chairs. And then I found this little instrument to give me leverage. It's called a dolly. And you slip it under the stack of chairs and you tilt it back, and the dolly uses its weight, and by applying just a little bit of force to the top of the dolly, I could flip all of those chairs back and move them where I wanted to. And the key to overcoming that resistance was not to attack it harder, but to attack it smarter by using leverage. And what you will discover is that one of these points is often the point of leverage to get you out of the ditch. And so, here's what that means in practical terms. Some of you need a friend. And the point of leverage is going to be you're going to have to tenaciously pursue community, even though it's awkward to meet new people, even though you're part of it, at least half of the world that's not terribly outgoing. You're going to have to just be awkward and meet people. You're going to have to go get into a fellowship group. It's going to take a little while, and you should know this, especially if you're kind of a socially anxious person. Know this. Developing friendships takes time. It doesn't happen instantly. So you can't go in and give it a week in your fellowship group and then go, I'm so discouraged, I don't connect with anyone here, because people don't work that way. It takes longer, and so you're going to have to stick with it. But you're going to find that's going to be the leverage point. I say this as someone, you might find this surprising because I can get up here and stand on the stage and carry on, but I'm actually not terribly outgoing. I actually don't like going to big parties of people where you don't know anyone. You just go, hey, I'm Hunter. Good to meet you. What do you do? Where are you from? That's not my favorite thing in the world to do. I like hanging out with a few good friends. That's life to me. But just mixing it up with people I don't know is not my favorite thing in the world. And I've moved a lot as a kid growing up. And I remember the first time I moved to a new city, it was a very difficult transition. I was downcast at times because I had no friends. And I found that it took time to develop friends. And you know what the leverage point for me in transitioning was? I stuck it out for a couple of years and made friends. And so take that as encouragement. That's what some of you need. Some of you, the leverage point could be physical. I have a great hero in the faith who is a pastor, a preacher. I started listening to him when I was a brand new Christian, and he could explain the Bible better than anyone I had ever heard before. He's a gifted communicator. A few years ago, he went through a terrible bout of depression. And you know what the issue for him was? It was a physical issue. He had been working so much that his body was like hung in fourth gear and just kicking off adrenaline, and it couldn't stop. And so because of that, he was depressed. And you know what the leverage was to get him out of the ditch? I listened to him tell the story. The leverage was he had to rest and he had to take medicine to regulate his body. And that's what got him out of the ditch. Now, some of you need a physical cure to get out of the ditch. Some of you, now listen, some of you might find that you have a lot better outlook on life if you would take better care of yourself physically. Some of your takeaways from church today is to go start exercising and to eat whole grains and lean proteins. Some of you are going to pull out of the ditch. You might need physical help. You might need to take better care of yourself. You might need to see a doctor. The leverage point could be physical. And what happens is when you get the leverage, that then gives you the ground to build everything else up from. It gives you a foothold, so to speak. For some of you, the leverage is going to be spiritual. You have for too long pursued all the good things in God's creation, but not God Himself. And maybe your being here today is even the starting point of considering how to be under God's lordship. Maybe the leverage point is spiritual. But here's what else you'll discover. Every one of these leverage points has some limitations to it. Like you can take great care of yourself, but did you know that one of these days you're still going to come down with something that's going to kill you? Healthy people get cancer. Skinny people have heart attacks sometimes. Like sometimes eventually you're going to deal with a physical ailment that is going to suck the life, either suddenly or gradually. It's going to suck the life out of you. What you discover when you see older people who are at the end of their life, you often discover all kinds of junk that starts coming up out of their hearts. They get cranky, angry, bitter, cussy. And the reason is they don't have the physical strength to hold it in anymore. You're going to be physically tried at some point in your life. And so, eating right and exercising, good for you, but it has limits. Socially, you will even discover that friendship has its limits. Look at Proverbs 14:10. It says, "The heart knows its own bitterness, and no stranger shares its joy." Just hit it a couple of times. It'll come up. The heart knows its own bitterness, and no stranger shares its joy. Now, here's what this is saying. That there is actually a limit to which other people can even understand you. Your heart is going to be more familiar with its own bitterness and its own joy better than anyone else. And so no one is going to understand you completely. So even friendships, even the most intimate of relationships like marriage, have their limits. Some of you are going to discover that even trying to cure yourself spiritually has its limits. 16:2 says, "All the ways of a man are pure in his own eyes, but the Lord weighs the spirit." What this is saying is we sometimes don't even realize what is going on in our own souls. We sometimes can't even diagnose ourselves very accurately. And the only thing that's going to be able to diagnose is if God speaks a word from outside to tell us what's going on. So, you need physical help, you need social help, you need spiritual help, but here's the deal, you need something more than that. You need God Himself. And here's how it works. God Himself became one of us and dwelled among us. And everything that we just read that could go wrong went wrong for him. Circumstances toward the end of his life began to go very bad for him. He was accused of things he was not guilty of as a plot to put him to death. The religious and social leaders of his society started to turn against him and felt threatened by him and eventually conspired to put him to death. They got one of his friends socially to turn on him. And then at the end of his life, as he is being tempted more than he's ever been tempted before, all his friends deserted him. They all ran away from him. He went to his cross all alone. We see him even in the last day of his life becoming physically overcome by all that was going on. In Matthew 26, he's praying in the last night of his life. He's going to be dead less than 24 hours from now. And in Matthew 26, verse 38, he's praying. He says, "My soul is sorrowful, even to death." And then he asks his disciples, "Would you remain here and watch with me?" And then going a little further, he fell on his face. He didn't kneel down. He fell over. He was so overcome with grief and anxiety about what he was about to endure that he was physically overcome by it. And he fell on his face and prayed. He said, "My Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will." And the cup represents yours and mine and the whole world's sin, our spiritual junk, that he was going to take with him and endure the cost of on his cross. You see him at the end of his life. He is suffering emotionally. He is suffering physically. He is alone. And he's crying out in anguish. Matthew chapter 27, verse 45. "Now from the 6th hour, there was darkness over all the land until the 9th hour. And about the 9th hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, 'My God, why have you forsaken me?' And some of the bystanders, hearing it, said, 'This man is calling Elijah.' And one of them at once ran and took a sponge, filled it with sour wine, put it on a reed, and gave it to him to drink. But the others said, 'Wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to save him.' And Jesus cried out again with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit." A crushed spirit dries up the bones. Now here's what that means for people who are in a ditch, in a dark hour. Listen to the words of Hebrews, written to a people who were suffering and struggling to endure. Hebrews chapter 4, verse 14. "We do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. Let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need." What you need when your spirit is crushed is you need a throne of grace that you can draw near to. You need a high priest who has endured even worse than you are enduring now and who can completely sympathize with you. This is what I love about Christianity. It is not some simple little religion. See, a lot of people can tell you, you need to take better care of yourself. And a lot of people can tell you, you need a friend. And a lot of people can say, you need a little spirituality in your life. And some Christians can even go, and you need Jesus. And it sounds so trite. And here's the thing, that's all that's true, but it's all too simple. None of it is sophisticated and nuanced enough for the complex people God has made us to be. And so what God's Word tells us, what the gospel tells us, is that God actually gives it all to us. He says, take care of yourself. Get some friends. But then he says, and also know my Son, who has endured everything you're enduring, who can sympathize with everything you're going through, who will one day heal you completely, body, soul, spirit, emotionally, physically. And so this is the full breadth of God's multifaceted wisdom. And we see it all reflected in our high priest who hung on the cross, who was crushed and overcome with despair to the point of death, but who conquered it, and who now intercedes for us, and who now offers us grace if we'll draw near to Him. And so my prayer and my hope for all of you who are suffering, my prayer, my hope for all of you who will suffer, is that you will avail yourself to the full breadth of God's wisdom. Let us pray. Father, I want to pray for my friends. I'm coming to you this morning with a lot of friends in tow, and we're coming into your presence. And we're only privileged to come here because your Son has dealt with our sin. We're only privileged to come before the King of the universe because you sent your Son to take on our sin and our frailty. So we're coming here under His name. We're coming here by His reputation. And we're coming before you, our good Heavenly Father. And we're asking for wisdom. I pray for all of my friends here who are enduring something. Something's going on in their soul that maybe no one even knows about. But they are enduring a crushed spirit. And I pray that you would show them through your wisdom what the leverage point is. I pray that you would heal some of them physically. I pray you would help them be healthy physically. I pray for some of them you would bring friends and give them the energy to pursue relationships. I pray for some of them you will give them insight into their soul to see what they have called life, and they would instead see the one who is truly life. And then I pray for all of them, no matter what the leverage point is. I pray for all of them that they would know your Son. Not just that they would know about Him, but that they would know Him relationally and experientially. That they would be able to do what Hebrews says. They would be able to draw near to the throne of grace. They would have fellowship with Jesus. They would be able to hear Jesus say, I've been there. I've suffered through that. Let me give you strength to endure. I pray ultimately that you would use these periods of our lives to teach us the beauty and the goodness of your Son and of the gospel, that you would teach us His love, that you would teach us His compassion, you would teach us His concern. We ask that you would renew us as whole people and give us joy in our hearts that we can praise you, the author and giver of life. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.